the Jon Anik and Kenny Florian podcast. Jon Anik and Kenny Florian.
I f***ing love them. I can't get enough of them.
Let's hear that Boston next.
Big jab there from Duffy, and Frank Mir is hurt now. Down goes Duffy, out cold. Frank Mir does it again. Rock'em sock'em robots here. Oh my goodness.
Hyperbole.
There are a couple of absolutely self-involved bullshit artists.
Here are your hosts, Jon Anik and Kenny Florian.
That's some bang.
Somebody said Cody added a Dan Hooker soundbite to our podcast open. I didn't hear it there, but maybe it's not a bad idea. Speaking of not bad ideas, how about going live on a Sunday to recap a pay-per-view? It is episode 513 of the Anik Florian podcast. Good Sunday to you. Easy like Sunday morning. Maybe you're multitasking, watching football right now as I'm doing. It is September 15th, 2024. This is our 513th episode, KenFlo. It's great to see you, buddy. What'd you think of Noche UFC? What a crazy night, huh?
It was a crazy night, man. First of all, yeah, go Pats. Got a little bit of allergies going on here, Johnny, but dude, it was a long night, but it was really fun, man. It's always cool to kind of see new things inject into the sport, and see some of the things that work, some of the things that didn't work. But man, overall, I thought it was a pretty solid night for the UFC, and yeah, a lot to talk about though.
So I do have some questions for you as far as the television aesthetic. And sometimes when I talk about things in a positive way, people suggest that maybe I'm shilling for the UFC or it's hyperbolic promotionally, right? But when it came to this venue and this live event, I'm there for rehearsals on Thursday and Friday, and I'm ingesting all of this content and thinking, if you're in Las Vegas, you need to come see this thing. And people at home are going to be effectively blown away as well. So what size TV were you watching on? And to what extent did you think, Kenny, that the visuals from Sphere translated to the viewers at home?
So I wasn't on my big TV. I was in bed at that point when the main card started. But so what, like a 55-inch or something like that. But it was cool. Like a lot of the things that came on, I was like, oh wow, like it was trippy to see. Like, I always think that fights from a camera perspective looks cool when you see like the crowd kind of surrounded around the octagon, because it's just like it's the perfect venue for it. So that was a little different visually for me, and of course you had these crazy graphics behind everything, so that like constantly kept throwing me off. But it was wild, man. It was almost like this virtual world that was created last night. That was pretty cool. It was almost like this video game type experience with actual real characters though right before it. So it was really neat. Like my wife would mention, like, oh my God, like she was like blown away. Like she was loving it. She thought it was really cool.
Bro, it was the sickest shit I've ever seen. It truly was.
Live must have been totally different. Like totally different.
My brother Jason took a picture, and he was sitting right behind us, as he always is, of Diego Lopez with his hands in the air as he does as he hits the inspection zone with like this Coliseum backdrop. It's unbelievable.
It's crazy.
I feel pretty convicted in saying that despite the UFC's deal with MGM, that at some point this will be done again, because to execute it the way this live production team was able to do it without too many hitches sort of exceeded my expectations. I mean, I thought our Thursday rehearsal was, much choppier than Friday, and I just felt like this was such an ambitious undertaking, and largely it went off without a hitch. There were certain things that were a little bit hiccupy. We did our pay-per-view open from all the way up top, and then so when I got back downstairs, I didn't quite get back down in time, and then the card that I was handed was to a movie film and not the actual fight, and I was out of breath. So there were a few things that didn't go particularly great, but overall it was absolutely incredible. And I guess what I was sort of thinking, and we were only budgeted for 5.5 hours on television, which would have been the shortest telecast that I've ever done in 13 years with the UFC. But the pay-per-view ended up being obnoxiously long with 5 decisions. And even though it had maybe the fight of the year with Daniel Zellhuber and Esteban Ribovic's KenFlo, the last 2 fights took like 90 minutes and neither were particularly entertaining. Like Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad was exponentially more entertaining for me than Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili. So I found myself thinking after the fact, if you had this UFC 308 card at Sphere, right? And with respect, forget Mexican Independence Day for a second, Noche UFC, right? Let's say you do the year-end pay-per-view in Las Vegas every year at Sphere. And just for a second, for your imagination, Pretend that you're getting Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker, Alexander Rakic versus Magomed Ankalaev. Your main event is Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. On paper, UFC 307 and UFC 308 are absolutely absurd. And I think if you put the right combination of high-profile fighters and finishers at Sphere, bro, it'll change the game forever.
Yeah, I agree. And, you're not going to get every single one right. But I think also for the UFC that is so used to going into a stadium that is or an arena, which is just like every other arena, and doing what they do best is, they have it down expertly, right? They just go in there, do what they do. Being in a venue like this, I think, you know better than I do, but probably presented a lot of production challenges. It's just a completely different venue, completely different setup, whole different level of technology involved. And, it's just different. But as far as the card goes, yeah, I think they probably, looking back, would have liked to maybe have a different event. But, you try things and some things are going to work, some things aren't from a fight card perspective, right?
Sean O'Malley obviously could have turned in another highlight and sniped his way to a knockout, and maybe the narrative is different. Yeah, that's the photo there from Boston Anik of Diego Lopez. Just absolutely insane if you're watching on YouTube. But yes, Kenny, it was not at all out of the realm of possibility that Valentina Shevchenko and Merab Dvalishvili were going to wrestle for 25 minutes, right. And that's the way this show was going to end. So I just think that this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this venue. It was absolutely incredible to be a part of this live event. And, I just want to say to our entire live production team, Craig Borsari, Zach Candido, Michael LaPlante, everybody on down, there's only so much bandwidth I think we all have as human beings. And, I've never sort of felt more underslept and defeated showing up to do a live event just because of what the week held. But right. Just incredible to be a part of it. And for me to be able to see Joe Rogan in DC, sort of see all of these things for the first time. Rogan's seen it all, and he's never seen anything like this. So Sphere Las Vegas was incredible. To our directors, Anthony Giordano and Glenn Weiss, incredible job. And, hopefully it translated to people on TV, but at Anik Florian Pod, I'd be very curious to hear from people who are not only in the building, but watching at home. All right, Headlines is brought to you by Cuervo. Now's a good time to enjoy the tequila that invented tequila. Riyadh season Noche UFC, your main event and new undisputed UFC bantamweight champion and KenFlo. Indeed, it is the Georgian Merab Dvalishvili. He gets it done by unanimous decision, 48-47 times 3. And say what you want about the scorecards. Sean O'Malley winning rounds 3 and 5, but the rightful man won, Kenny. And Merab strategized. He fought exceedingly well. And as he said to Joe Rogan, he could do this for 20 rounds. He only needed to do it for 5, and he's the new champion.
He really could do it for 20 rounds. I absolutely believe him. Longo's been talking about that for a long time. And yeah, we have a new champion, and we knew that this was very possible. I think that we also knew it was possible for O'Malley to be able to catch Merab early in the fight and take him out. But as the fight went longer and longer, we knew Merab's chances of winning this fight was increased 10x. And I think that Merab should get a little bit of credit for being a little bit of a snake charmer a little bit towards O'Malley, because O'Malley seemed to be kind of watching, paralyzed, if you will, a little bit, entranced by the movement of Merab a little bit. Perhaps he was just waiting for that takedown for so long that he wasn't letting his hands go. But whatever it was, Merab was able to distract, feint, confuse O'Malley, get in on those legs, put O'Malley on his back again and again and again. And more than anything else, take away that knockout shot early. I thought Merab was a little conservative for the first couple of minutes, and then he was a little conservative to end the fight to ensure that O'Malley wouldn't get one of those opportunities to get that knockout.
So I'm sitting here with the California State Athletic Commission's rule guide from UFC 298. And before we dive too much deeper into the fight, Kenny, there was a little bit of a dust-up at the beginning of the fight between Tim Welch and Merab Dvalishvili. We documented this on the Anik Florian podcast, and we do our best as commentators to know this rule book backwards and forwards, but that doesn't mean things don't slip through the cracks. We had an extended conversation with Longo about this. I got a text from Big John McCarthy, Kenny. Corners are not allowed to talk to their opponents.
Okay, yep.
They're allowed to talk to their fighters, They're not allowed to talk to the opponent. So that's why Herb Dean intervened. But I did not know that to be true. So use of abusive language in the fighting area. I meant to look this up before the show. But yeah, you aren't allowed, I guess, to talk to the opponent. But I just don't know that I necessarily see that in the actual language.
Yeah, I don't see that here either, John. I see use of abusive language in the fighting area. The use of abusive language is not allowed during MMA competition. Now, doesn't go into detail what that is, but it says it is the sole responsibility of the referee to determine when language crosses over the line to abusive. It should be clear that fighters can talk during a match. Their mere use of auditory language is not a violation of this rule. Examples of abusive language would be racially motivated or derogatory language. So it's still kind of vague.
Right. And I do think that a lot of the rules are open to interpretation. And Big John McCarthy is a dear friend of mine. I think he is the foremost authority on this. And for me, he's my number one MMA resource. But Big John, text me later because I don't see anything in there that says you can't talk to the opponent. Doesn't really matter. I just am so blown away by Merab. And one thing I said, Kenny, on the post-fight show, you know, Colby Covington in one of our fighter meetings said when he was playing soccer at 8 years old, and I know you have a great resting heart rate. You can run a 6-minute mile probably still at 48 years of age, right? But Colby Covington said he knew at 8 years old that he had this sort of cardiovascular strength that maybe his peers did not. And sure, like all of us have different levels of will. Like my daughter Tatum has more will than me when we wrestle. I don't know if she's in better shape than me. But Kenny, this man's ability to weaponize cardio and to treat this championship fight, not unlike Bilal Muhammad did, as another glorified training session. I'm blown away at the relaxed nature of some of these athletes when they arrive at a championship setting for the first time. And, you know, it just doesn't faze them at all. I'm just not wired like that.
It's crazy. So one of the most common dogs that people use, military police or law enforcement use, are these dogs called Belgian Malinois. And one of the best descriptions that I heard of these dogs is that they have so much energy that it seems like they're vibrating. And that's how I see Merab Dvalishvili is. Even when he's standing still, it seems like he's moving. It's like there's frenetic energy, and it's a good energy. Like he's always smiling. It looks like he's always ready to jump out of the building. That's the way this dude is built. And there's just not a whole lot of people like that. This is a gift from God. To have this level of energy and conditioning is absolutely insane. And again, like, because you look at, and this is no disrespect because he is skillful with his takedowns and a lot of that stuff, but there's no one specific skill where you're like, oh my gosh, it blows me away. It's how he puts it all together is good enough. But that conditioning, you know, we use weaponized conditioning all the time, but guys like Bilal, guys like Merab absolutely are capable of doing that.
So it was 49-46 from one judge and then 48-47 for the other two judges. Sean O'Malley doing some good work to the body there in that fifth and final round. But Kenny, speed versus quickness. So when Sean O'Malley fought Marlon Cheeto Vera, the speed discrepancy was omnipresent from moment one of that fight.
Yeah.
But Merab is so fucking quick, Kenny. You know, I found myself this morning thinking I think he might have beaten Aljamain Sterling in his prime. You know, I just feel like there's a quickness to everything that he does and a great timeliness to his entries and his takedown games. And I don't know, he's really a unique puzzle and a guy who I think is really hard to replicate in training.
Not a lot of people are going to be able to fake out someone like Henry Cejudo, an Olympic gold medalist in freestyle wrestling, level change and put him on his back. Merab's level change is absolutely brilliant, especially how he can disguise it with movement and his strikes. And there was his first takedown of the fight was lightning quick. O'Malley went for a 1-2 combination. And I mean, it was like he was at full extension and Merab was completely underneath him at his hips. It was the thing of beauty. And Merab was just able to like snatch his leg in a lot of funky positions, like with such quickness. And, you know, okay, striking, yes, you're absolutely right. O'Malley is definitely quicker, maybe one of the fastest, if not the fastest guy in that division when it comes to throwing a strike. But when it comes to level changing, getting in on your legs, Merab is one of the fastest as well.
Later today, we will be joined by Ray Longo in about 15 minutes as we congratulate the coach on cornering a 4th UFC champion. We will also be joined by mixed martial arts manager, judo champion, Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, Alex Davis. And one of the things that Alex has talked to me about, and he's going to talk about it today, Kenny, is, and this man loves mixed martial arts and wants to affect change in so many different ways, but grading fights on their relative entertainment value, right? Because if a fighter loses 4 fights in a row, if those are maybe grade 3 or grade 4 fights, highly entertaining, then maybe it lands in a different way. And I found myself last night with Dominic Cruz talking about the relative entertainment value of Muhammad versus Edwards 2 versus this fight. And also guys like Bilal Muhammad and Merab Dvalishvili not really getting enough credit for their striking. I understand that Merab's striking, Kenny, is a means to an end, but I mean, he's getting better and not worse. John Wood, I think, has done a lot of good things. This wasn't as entertaining a fight for me, but, like, I don't know, like, at what point do we credit, like, Merab's jab and his striking and not just say, like, yeah, it's just a means to an end? Is that a fair question?
No, absolutely. And I think it's tricky because it sounds like kind of we're making these excuses. First of all, Merab won. He won. Not only did he win, I thought it was pretty damn dominant. But,
yeah,
you know, like if you just went in and we said, all right, listen, Mr. Gold Medalist wrestler, Jordan Burroughs or whatever, why don't you go out there without any striking and take that guy down who weighs right around the same weight as you? It is not the same. You must utilize striking at some level in order to utilize your takedowns. Like, you can't just go in there blindly. Khabib needed to set up his takedowns with strikes. You needed some kind of distraction. You needed some kind of a threat to earn that respect, to have that distraction in order to get in on those legs. And Merab's activity, whether it was getting into the clinch or getting out of the clinch, were things that O'Malley had to worry about. If your brain is worried about a lot of things, then guess what? You're going to be distracted at some point, and you're gonna cause some mishaps, and that's what Merab's able to do. So 100% agree.
So in terms of your relative nerves for your UFC championship fights versus, say, your biggest soccer game at Boston College, where you're more part of a team, you know, you had so many amazing moments in big spots in your career. Arguably the highest profile fight of your career was actually the Joe Stevenson fight underneath Randy Couture and Brock Lesnar, and it was one of your better performances. But, like, how did you feel for the Stevenson fight, say, compared to, like, the BJ Penn fight?
Right. So for the BJ Penn, like, mind-wise, I felt great. I'll give an example for a fight that I didn't feel great. I was just talking to Cody about this before the show. When I fought in the Garden, I remember being so conscious of the crowd, of the boos, of, you know, whatever was going on outside of me. I think having that pressure of fighting at home and, you know, again, trying to work towards that next 155 world championship potential fight, all that stuff got to me. I remember being so focused on that. And if you're not going on your own terms and you're being influenced by outside factors outside of that, that is not good. And I think sometimes there's physical reasons why we don't perform. Sometimes there's mental reasons. And sometimes it just doesn't make sense of why you're there and why you're not for certain spots. But to me, and I don't know if this is where you're going with you know, say Sean O'Malley, for example. Sean O'Malley is one of those guys who always shows up. And that's one of those fights. And again, a lot of it is deserving to Merab, what he was able to do. But I never really saw O'Malley like on top of his game last night. Like when he walked out and before that fight, I knew something was kind of up. He just looked kind of flat. He didn't have that same kind of energy and acceptance of the moment like he normally does.
Yeah. And who knows, right? You can have the most optimal training camp of your career, as he suggested he did, but maybe you got nothing left on fight night, even though Tim Welch tells you the legs are as strong as they've ever been. And real quickly, putting a bow on the whole Tim Welch and opposing corners talking to the other athletes. When the Anik Florian podcast tweeted about it, Jason Herzog replied, "All's fair in love and war." So even within the elite ranks of the referees, it seems as though there is some dissension of opinion. So as far as the 5th and final round was concerned and Herb Dean's continuous verbals for these fighters to work. It was tremendously off-putting to me, certainly to Joe Rogan. And Kenny, I'm not sure exactly why those imperatives were coming from Herb Dean at this stage of the fight. It was not Merab Dvalishvili being exercising timidity or anything like that.
Yes.
You know, he was up 4-0 potentially. He had the fight in the bag, and I don't know. It just seemed to me that Herb Dean was injecting himself in the fight in a way that he didn't need to. Even though I really do love him as a human being, I have to be critical on a live mic, and I believe he absolutely deserved that criticism.
I agree with you, absolutely. And I gotta say, this is tough because sometimes I feel like Herb Dean isn't engaged in the fight. Like sometimes I feel like he's a little bit late to make certain decisions or whatever. This was the most active I have seen him ever. Yeah. And you know, you were talking about timidity. I have the rules gun. I'm going to read this here. It says timidity, avoiding contact or consistently dropping the mouthpiece or faking an injury. Timidity is defined as any fighter who purposely avoids contact with his opponent or runs away from the action of the fight. Timidity can also be called by the referee of any attempt by a fighter to receive time by falsely claiming a foul, injury, or purposely dropping or spitting out their mouthpiece or other action designed to stall or delay the action of the fight.
Right.
I never saw that. I did not see that. You know, you can circle. There's no rules that say you can't circle away from action, whether you're looking for an angle or trying to avoid getting hit. For me, if you're not engaged in like, these were like periods of time were like 1 or 2 seconds, and Herb Dean was right on top of Merab telling him to fight. And to me, that seemed a little bit odd. Like, do you want O'Malley to get a knockout? Or are you trying to shoot at the wrong time? Like, what is going on? And so it's tough for me because it was good to see Herb Dean be more engaged in the fight, but not like that. You can't. That's when there's a certain level of bias or intervention where it's just kind of uncalled for. So, yeah, agreed.
I'm friends with a lot of these referees. I have had public dust-ups with some of them, but, you know, to Jason Herzog, Mark Smith, John McCarthy, Mark Goddard, like, with total respect, I dare one of you guys to text me and defend Herb Dean's verbals in that situation. I got a text message from Tyson Chartier, coach at the New England Cartel. I, and assume many more, really appreciated your pushback on Herb Dean, asking for more action and trying to influence the fight. Was very frustrating to see. Thank you for doing that. And I have to live with myself, right? And I went on the post-fight show and regrettably called Manon Fior a bad bitch, okay? Now, she's a bad bitch. I think she's going to fight for the title next, but I'm judged by every utterance over 8 hours. But at that point in time, Joe Rogan is in the octagon, and I felt the need to say what I said, and I have to deal with the consequences, whether that's from Dana White or Craig Borsari or Herb Dean or anybody else. But I also have a job to do. And in this situation, I found it to be very off-putting that in the 5th round of this fight, all of a sudden Herb Dean is going to insist that, you know, Merab work when he's not really doing anything all that differently than he had done for 4 rounds. I found it to be fucking insane.
Yeah, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't know where it came from. Even at the end, like, it was confusing. There was the point where Merab was kissing the back of O'Malley. Remember, he kind of had him in like a headlock / guillotine. And after he got up, I think there was confusion from Merab that the round had ended.
Right.
And at one point, Herb Dean kind of is like, hey, he literally calls out, hey, gets in between them. The round is not over yet.
Right.
O'Malley's trying to like get some last like licks in on Merab. And it was just very confusing on what was going on there. And for Herb Dean, and again, I know it's loud in there, things can be confusing, but that was another little mistake, which I didn't really understand what was going on. So yeah, it wasn't a great night for Herb Dean, and referees are going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. We're human. But that fight to me in particular was a little odd. Yeah.
And I do think referees and judges are put in such a hard position. I think the judges have fewer resources than anybody really who works in mixed martial arts. But I do think, as I've said repeatedly, these referees are universally praised when they allow fights to go long and greatness ensues. Yeah. And they're roundly criticized when they stop fights too early. You know, I mean, the Daniel Zellhuber Esteban Ribovics fight. Yes. Thank God it continued, right? But I do think you are seeing from the elite referees longer and longer leashes. And in this particular main event, I think Herb Dean will have to assess his work and maybe affect some change. All right. It's a championship Sunday here on the Anik and Florian podcast. Time now to go 3 wide and welcome in the star of the show, the future UFC Hall of Famer. It's Raymond Peter Longo. And what else can be said about you?
We got another one, don't we? We got another one, Ray. You have another one. You have another champ.
I got to tell you, I'll be honest, starting to get boring. Another champ, man. I couldn't be happier. One of the nicest guys you ever meet. By the way, did I miss something? Or is there a delay?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah.
So a lot to get into, Ray. We're so happy for you, obviously. This delay is a little bit frustrating right now. But you said at one point to Merab Dvalishvili, I think after round 1, I fucking love you, man. And whose cell phone is beeping? Come on, guys. So, Ray, like, I know how much love you have for this particular individual and all of your athletes, but I got to think that this one is uniquely special for you, just seeing what Merab has done over the last 7 to 8 years. And obviously Saturday night, he changed his life forever.
I mean, listen, man, again, if you know him, you really know what a beautiful human being he is and how he loves his country, how he loves his teammates. He's just a great guy. And to watch him, when I first met him, he was going to quit martial. He was going to quit MMA. He was done because when he got to New York, he got hooked up with a couple of complete idiots, and they were ruining it for him. He didn't have command of the language. You're in a new place. You're relying on what people tell you, and to watch him, go through that and get the belt, and even his story with Aljo. I mean, there's so much shit to unwrap. The story to me was how him and Aljo really hung tough together on their convictions and not fighting each other. And he waited. That's not easy to do. He had to take tough fights. And I think it all paid off in the end. And that's the beautiful thing. They kept their friendship going, and they'll always be friends. I hope so. As a guy that knows both of them, it would deeply hurt me if they weren't. But they're good. They're good. And that's it, man. That's the story to me for Merab. But just a great night. And I don't know, man. It was really good.
Based on what seemed like the game plan, it seemed like pretty flawless execution, Ray. Was there anything that you saw based on the game plan heading into this, provided by you and John Wood, that made you nervous during the fight? Was there anything that maybe didn't go the way you wanted?
No, let me just say something. First of all, if John Wood came up with the game plan, because we've talked what'd you do, this and that, but look, it's Merab, so you're either all the way in or all the way out. Don't rush anything. It's kind of what I liked what John did. He kept it really, really basic and tailored to what Merab does. And Merab, he's always going to be in shape. You just wind him up, point him into the fight. He kind of does what he always does, but he had to be a little more patient this time. And even like Aljo was saying, you can't. I'm going to be all over the place, but like you can't rush O'Malley, right? He's a counter puncher, right? Think what we saw. That was the biggest takeaway for me is when he's coming forward, I'm going to agree with Dana White, and I think you said it, Kenny. He looked flat. I mean, after a couple of minutes, I turned to Wood when we were in the corner. I go, he can't hurt him. He's pushing his punches. Like you see this kid on the pads, man. He's snapping everything. He's super fast. To me, it looked like quicksand in there when I'm sitting there, watching it unfold, and I go, man, I just felt good from round 1. I actually knew Merab was going to win that fight at that point. I didn't think he could get hurt, and he wasn't going to overcommit. I think O'Malley was throwing the body shot to try to. He's either doing it for 2 reasons, but trying to set up for the overhand right. So he's trying to get him to bite on that. Merab didn't bite on it, and even those punches they look labored to me for a guy that, like, again, I don't know him, but I know he's technically very, very good. But I think Merab's presence really just offset him to a point where he looked just not good. with
Yeah.
anything, and the other, the other part is, Merab's just going to wear on you. And once you feel him, like he gets the body lock, it's hard to even break his hands, Kenny. He's super strong. So there's going to be frustration. I mean, I'm sure Sean worked the wrestling aspect to death, but this is a different beast. You got to keep going and going and going. And he misses one. It just doesn't matter. He's not that guy that's going to say, you're not going to deter him with a stop takedown. He's just going to keep coming. So just really, 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 I thought whoever scored that fight, 48-47, I think is insane. There's no way that guy won 2 rounds.
That was
no
odd.
way.
Ray, before I let John hop back in here, I wanted to ask you about what your thoughts were on the refereeing of Herb Dean. Was there anything there that was kind of confusing you or frustrating to you as you were watching that fight?
I'm going to tell you something. I listened to you talk, but I'm so engaged, and I knew Merab was going to win that fight. Nothing was bothering me. Like I got to that point where I don't really give a shit what the guy does. They're not going to take away the fight. But I believe I had this conversation with Bilal. John spoke to Bilal a lot on the bus. Just a super nice guy. I'm glad I got to talk to him. But here's the scary part. And I think I'm sure it was him we talked about this. And it sounds conspiratorial, but the ref, it might not be a 20% factor, but it could be a 3 to 5% factor. Same with the judges. You get a close round and you think you can get away with it, you're going for the guy you want. I don't care what anybody says. And obviously by those scorecards, it's who do you think they wanted to win? They made that fight a 1-point fight. Did that look like a 1-point fight to anybody?
Right. So Ray, have you watched it back or no?
No.
Okay. So
No,
I'm curious after you watch it back, how you will feel about some of the commands from Herb Dean asking Merab and maybe Sean to a lesser degree to work in that 5th round, because we found it tremendously off-putting and we leaned into it a lot on the broadcast. But here's the thing. So round 3, not a ton happened. When Daniel Cormier and I first heard those 48-47s, we were absolutely shocked. But then when I thought about it a little bit, round 3, not a ton happened. And certainly in round 5, after your guy got hurt with a body shot, that was an O'Malley round. So I had it 49-46. I had Merab up 4-0 going into round 5. But you can have a wayward scorecard there, and I think it can still be a dominant fight. So I don't know that there's too much meat on the bone there. But yeah, dude, I do feel like in that 5th round, at times it's like, what are we doing here? It's like, are we trying to like force Merab to do something that's going to present an opportunity for Sean? I don't know, because I'm just an MMA fan. I just happen to have a job that requires me to say some things when big things are going on.
Dude, it gets crazy, man. Look, back in the day with boxing, if you had 2 guys and your guy had a certain style, there were refs that that they would let you fight in the clinch. They're not going to stop it early. So there's ways to maneuver a lot of things that, like, again, if you talk about them, it sounds kind of crazy, but they 100% is 100%. But I was so, at that point, John, I just knew he was winning. And I just don't think the guy had any steam on those punches to hurt Merab.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I guess the body shots finally paid off in the 5th round a little bit, but he wasn't. Right. It wasn't like that was a big deal. He got hit to the body and he felt it,
Yeah. Hey, so one of our listeners wants to know, his name is Eric. He says, so when is Ray Longo going to corner a striker to a world title? He's just joking around. But of course, when you look at these guys, right? Matt Serra, Chris Weidman, Aljamain Sterling, Merab Dvalishvili. I was talking to Cruzy about this last night. An unbelievable collection of grapplers and now world champions.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think Rogan said it a long time ago. I think he saw one. No. It's not a joke, though. It really isn't, because it's true, obviously. But Rogan, I think it said, like, I have a way of connecting to the wrestlers to make them believe in their hands good enough to get them to, what they want to do. And I think that's pretty accurate, But I do have one striker in the gym that, no. That's good, man. That's good.
You are a tremendous influence on so many different athletes. And certainly we've talked a lot over the 10-year or so history of this podcast about, your conditioning stuff. Matt Serra always gives you credit for your ability to train strength and conditioning. But this is just incredible. We're just so happy for you, and for Merab, of course, gosh, man, I always say in this job, the most special part for me is seeing non-champions become champions. And in this case, it just feels particularly special because of the way his UFC career began with the Frankie Saenz split and the Ricky Simone fight and waiting for Aljo and dealing with all the bullshit, winning 10 straight fights. I love Umar Nurmagomedov, but he ain't going to have to win 10 straight fights to realize a title fight. I know they're all special, Ray, but this one feels particularly so and satisfying, I would think, for you.
Oh, 100%. Listen, the kid hit. One thing I loved about him from day one is that, he hit adversity in those first two fights, and it wasn't really him. I think he won both fights, but he did have to make some corrections. Like even in the Frankie Saenz fight, he was jumping all over him. So he had to calm down. He had to learn how to control the guy more and not go completely apeshit. So he was always making improvements on the job. And if you have that type of mindset, even if you're losing, but you really not just say it, you do it, because a lot of people want to just, interject these cliches, but he actually does it. He just kept getting better and better. And I think in the long run, by making him fight those fights against those good guys, could have been the difference in this fight. I mean, look, O'Malley's first offense was against Chito Vera. And I love Chito, nothing wrong, but that was a bullshit. That's a bullshit thing. You know what I mean? He should have fought like Merab when he did that thing with the charts and he fights number 6. He's fighting over. It's true. You know what I mean? So you fight when you have that type of experience and you build that type of confidence growing with all those fights. I think it makes a big difference. I mean, he went into that fight very confident based on his past. O'Malley, maybe not. Maybe he bought into who did he ever fight? Petey Jan fight. People think that was a great fight, but people think Jan won the fight. The other fights were, just they were good. He's starching guys, but they're standing right in front of him with their hands at their ass. You're going to let a sniper.
So you felt he really was untested against a really high-level grappler. You felt like he
100%.
Anybody like Merab, yeah.
100%. I'm not, and again, Merab hasn't faced anybody as rangy and as long and as accurate as O'Malley, but fucking Jose Aldo's pretty fucking good, man. It's close enough, so he did fight some good guys that he shut down. And
I think Ray, sorry to interrupt, but I think Sean would acknowledge that as well and sort of intimated as much in our fighter meeting that yes, he was satisfied with his 25-minute cardio against Chito Vera, but he has not passed the test against a wrestler for 25 minutes, and he did not pass this test. So a lot of different angles that we can pursue here, Ray. Quickly, in the nature of spinning it forward, Merab Dvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov, you think that's going to be the fight next?
I'm going to say that's the fight they're going to push next, but I would give Figueiredo the fight before Umar at this point.
All right, yeah, I think Figueiredo has a case as well. 3 bantamweight wins over elite 35ers, yeah.
I think so. He was a former champ, and he's doing great in the division now. So I think that fight makes sense. Or if not, but they're going to push for the Umar fight. I'm 100% sure. Yeah. Anyway, let me say another thing about O'Malley too, because I want to give him credit. The kid, that guy will definitely be back. He's definitely a super talented kid, and I think they got a good thing going over there. They got a small knit group, which I love. And I think he's going to grow tremendously from this fight.
I do want to talk about Sean O'Malley in this context a little bit, because I think we all, Kenny, would love to see him now in a main event against Corey Sandhagen or a high-profile fight against one of these other elite bantamweights, but there is a fucking murderer's row waiting for the former champion Sean O'Malley right now at 135 pounds. And it stands to reason he's going to be the betting underdog against some of these guys. You know, we've said repeatedly that in Sean O'Malley at 35 and Dricus du Plessis at 85, a lot of their contemporaries, KenFlo, believe those are beatable champions, and du Plessis has not proven to be beatable.
Right.
But Merab wasn't the only wrestler grappler type, KenFlo, that was salivating at the opportunity to face Sean O'Malley. And now the guy who shows up next in his bracket, KenFlo, is going to be somebody like Corey Sandhagen or a rematch with Petr Yan. And I don't know how soon we see Sean O'Malley, but I don't know that you're going to see him in the next 6 months.
Well, the UFC is filled with apex predators, right? You know, I know people don't love that cliche, but it's true, especially in the 135-pound division. And you better believe there were every single person in that division, especially the ones that are elite, were watching that night and looking for ways to defeat O'Malley, or wanting that confirmation bias of saying, this is the way you do it, or one of the ways you could do it. And once someone keys in on that, they actually build on that blueprint or try to, and then expose him yet again. So I'm really curious to see how O'Malley comes back from this. Is he going to work on these weaknesses and improve this? Will he be better than before? But no question about it, he's still a huge name. And because of that, every elite guy in that division is going to try to make a name off of that big name.
Hey, Ray, what was your overall Sphere experience like?
Ooh, listen, man, I was in the back for the whole time, obviously. So I wanted to at least get some sort of feel for it. So I went down and they let me walk in there, and then they threw me right the fuck out. But I did in between fights when they're doing that thing. I did get to see some of it. It looked great. But in all honesty, I was just focused on Merab, and
fair.
There was nothing going on that blew my socks off. But I can't say that because I was in the back, and when I was out there with Merab, I tried looking around a little bit, but nothing that I was like having a holy shit moment. But how was your experience? You were in there the whole time.
I thought it was absolutely incredible. The whole rehearsal thing Thursday and Friday was particularly daunting, and as I said earlier, I was pretty toasted, I think, in more ways than one when I showed up to the arena on Saturday night. But no, it was an experience unlike any that I have had in broadcasting, and I hope we get to do it again. The crowd wasn't particularly loud, and I don't know exactly how a live sporting event crowd translates in there. But I also feel like, Ray, we did have 5 decisions on the main card, and I didn't think either of the championship fights were particularly entertaining. So the night, I did think, sort of dragged over the final 90 minutes, and I think that did affect some of the people in there. But I thought it was as special a live event as I've ever been a part of. So
beautiful. That's beautiful.
Ray, I just want to ask you. I just want to ask you if I could, and I don't know if you can even answer this question, but I did have it in my notes. How do you sort of compare all these amazing moments over the course of your Hall of Fame career when you think back to Matt Serra against George St. Pierre and Chris Weidman against Anderson Silva and Aljamain Sterling becoming the undisputed bantamweight champion against all odds when they didn't want to give him the opportunity, and then Merab doing this? All of these have had unique circumstances, but the common thread has been you. So how do you compare all of these different experiences that now have transpired for you over the course of 17 remarkable years?
Oh, man, that's a tough question. I'm just happy for each and every one of these guys. Merab's got a beautiful house now in Vegas. Look, I know it sounds like bullshit, but it was always about what these guys were going to do after they were done fighting, and using fighting as a metaphor for life, and learning how to dig down deep and get what you want. And, never, ever quitting. So they've all 4 of those guys are very successful right now. And that makes me really, really happy, but all the moments were great in their own right for different reasons. You can't, Serra against GSP, Weidman against Silva, dude, that's going to be tough to beat. You know what I mean? So, Aljo, unfortunately, he got his title with the DQ, but then he went on to beat Pedion. So to me, that was a great moment to second fight. You know what I mean? When he convincingly, to me, won. And then, Merab, just the way he came up and what I've watched this kid go through and how hard he worked and, having a job while he was training, and not only a job where he's sitting in like a booth or he's he's doing construction. He's working his fucking ass off.
Yeah.
But again, I think those are the things that build character, right? Those are the things that define you. Like, I was not worried about Merab, win or lose in this fight, because I know he'd keep everything in perspective. If he had to go back to work tomorrow, he'd just do it. It's not, he's not driven like the way, he comes from a totally different spot on the globe, and he's really humble, and he's got humility, and he's great to people. He's grateful for everything he's gotten. And those are the qualities you want to see in a person. And, so to answer your question, they're all special, but, the first two were kind of crazy because it was, kind of a long time ago now. So this is, it's just, look, it's all about the fighter, man. I don't know what to say. Yeah. I'm grateful for them even letting me be in the corner, to be honest with you. I've been really blessed with working with thoroughbreds, man. And that's what you need, I think I had this conversation with Santino DeFranco, I think is totally one of the most underrated coaches in the business. The kid's intelligent. He understands the game really well, but you have to have a thoroughbred, because you could have an ordinary good guy. It's just not going to be good enough, So Merab, if anybody put the work in and they want to know how hard he works, or you're going to get guys that want to take the shortcut and just get in there for the fame and the glory, it ain't going to fucking work like that. This motherfucker worked his goddamn ass off, and that's the takeaway. And this one's for Chris Weidman's father-in-law, Marivi's father, Vinny, man. He picked that kid from the beginning, because you got to remember when Merab was in the gym, I had Weidman, you had Iaquinta, Rouser, so there were guys before him. So I wasn't really looking. I knew he worked hard and he was a great guy, but people would tell me this is the guy. Vinny said it that one night. I remember we had a crazy workout, and Merab got on the treadmill. He had that thing up to, maxed out at 10, and he was booking. And Vinny goes, "This is your next guy, man. This work ethic is crazy." And Vinny was a big wrestling guy, so he knew what the wrestling grind was all about. And that's what Merab brought to the table, man. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Trust me.
It's incredible. It really is. And the work ethic certainly leads the dance, but truly a guy who can treat these championship fights like glorified training sessions, and he's going to be a tough out at 135. And I do believe that he was wise to no-sell the Umar Nurmagomedov thing and make sure that he preserved this moment. And the last thing I'll just say, in Bilal Muhammad and Merab Dvalishvili, the UFC has two great champions that are going to be more than willing to defend these titles regularly. And I do think that both of those guys are going to be an asset to the UFC. Hey, you're sticking around in Vegas for Dana White's Contender Series. Is that accurate?
Yeah, got Dylan Montello Tuesday night in the main event. Very excited for him. I hope he completes the weekend. We go home with two big wins, and that'll be fantastic.
All right. Well, I know you're over there at the Virgin Penthouse with my twin bro and Big Ron, so I might see you later. But on behalf of the entire Anik and Florian podcast family, congratulations, man. I mean,
hey, listen, my teeth look whiter in this light.
They look so fucking white in this light.
I mean, come on, bro. What the fuck?
They look so...
I knew you guys were doing something.
Yeah, championship light on you today, because your teeth look very stained when you're in New York, Ray.
Those eyes, though, our female audience just went up tremendously.
Oh yeah, look at you, fucking Benjamin Button. Ray Longo cornering a UFC fighter to a title for the fourth time. Do you have any final thoughts before we let you fly?
Listen, I want to give a couple of shout outs to some people. Please. First off, ran into a Minutemen at the team dinner. Boyd, thank you very much for jumping out of the crowd and taking a pic. We got Kylie from San Diego. And last but not least, man, I met a really cool dude, man. Ode Osborne's trainer, Jason Manley. Yeah, I was at the PI. I didn't have a ride. He overheard it. He took me back to the Red Rock. Just such a beautiful act of kindness. That guy will always have a special place with me. I love
Yeah.
when people do good things, man. I just love
Yeah.
it. So shout out to
great.
Jason Manley. Sorry
Yeah.
it didn't go your way. I thought that fight was close too, though. But
Yeah. Great coach,
anyway,
great
that's it.
grappler. All right, man.
Yeah,
Well,
great guy,
congratulations.
man.
So a lot of people, though,
sweetheart.
coming up to you, talking to you about the Anik and Florian podcast this week. That's good. That's good. We got a lot of traction.
100%. This podcast is this has to win this year, John. No,
Let's go, Ray.
Wait, you think we're going to beat
if-
Dave White's Contender Series in the category of best MMA programming? Is that what you're suggesting?
well, what the hell is that? What is that doing?
Well, their
What is
budget
that doing in
is
the category?
billions of dollars, and it's a fight promotion that feeds the UFC. So in a meritocracy, I feel like our content can compete with theirs, but in a popular vote, I just don't know how we beat that show. You know?
No, well,
Dollar for dollar, though.
We can only hope that everything's run as a meritocracy. So we'll see what we got.
I mean, you think I'm going to beat Laura Sanko in a popular vote for commentator of the year? There's no fucking way. You know, I'd vote for her too. Hey, congratulations from the bottom of our collective hearts, buddy. And maybe I'll see you in about an hour. I'm heading over there, but thanks for waking up early, and best of luck with Dylan on Tuesday.
All right, you're definitely coming over in an hour because I'll hang out for sure.
Yeah, I'll see you in an hour.
Beautiful, my man.
Ray Longo minute every week here on the Anik and
I
Florian
can't wait for
podcast.
number 5.
I know. Maybe you can actually corner
There's
a
a
fucking
couple of good
striker to a
strikers in
world
the
title.
gym, so
Yeah.
there's a couple of good strikers in the gym that could do it. So
Yeah.
I'm done with the wrestlers for now.
You're the man.
Now you made
Love you.
You gave me a new goal. You gave me a new goal. Take
There
it
you
easy,
go.
guys.
Love you, buddy. Ray Longo with us every week here on the Anik and Florian podcast. All love with me and Ray Longo, despite what some people want to try to lean into there. So real quickly, Kenny, and Alex Davis is coming up in about 15 minutes. There's so much we still have to get to here. Riyadh season, Noche UFC. But isn't it interesting, real quick, if I could get 30 seconds from you on this, the Sean O'Malley rebuild, right? And Corey Sandhagen and those type of guys showing up in his bracket. You know, one thing Dominic Cruz said to me last night, and I sort of passed it along as my own thought, but, you know, I don't know how soon we're really going to see Sean O'Malley right now. His goal extended beyond the World Championship. He wanted to go down as the biggest combat sports athlete of all time, and this was a huge opportunity that he was not able to take advantage of here Saturday night, and the rebuild's going to be something.
Absolutely. And we're going to find out what O'Malley really is made of. You know, we saw him come back after that first Cheeto Vera fight, you know, coming off of that loss, and he came back super strong. I expect to see that again. But, you know, I think it's important for to know what he's fighting for. Is he coming back to become a world champion again? Is he coming back to just make money and be a superstar? You know, that remains to be seen. I'm really curious about that. And by the way, you mentioning Dominic Cruz, that's another cool fight that I would like to see. Maybe Dom and O'Malley as well. That'd be interesting. So
that makes sense.
Great fights for him. So I'm excited to see what's next.
Thanks to everybody joining us on this live edition of the Anik and Florian podcast. If you would be so kind as to hit that like button on the live stream, our executive producer, Cody Merrow, would really appreciate the shit out of that. Sorry, Mom. Let us get to the co-headliner, Valentina Shevchenko over Alexa Grasso. What a performance from Valentina Shevchenko. Again, maybe it wasn't the most entertaining fight. Certainly, I don't think any of us is pining to see it a fourth time. But Valentina Shevchenko, Kenny, had a year off to sort of think about that split draw, to coach on The Ultimate Fighter. She did maybe have some pause competing on Mexican Independence Day against Alexa Grasso. But I thought she was at her best on this night. It was a throwback type of performance. And even though there are a lot of Grasso angles I'd like to get into, dude, how about Shevchenko in her 11th straight championship fight, becoming a now 2-time UFC women's flyweight champion and restoring order in many respects at 125?
It's impressive to see her compete every single time, because I never get the sense, even in her loss to Grasso or whatever, that it was for a lack of trying or for a lack of effort, like her not having a great camp or her not being hungry enough. I've never seen that. She'll make mistakes during a fight, but to keep that level of hunger and passion and dedication to your discipline is something we should all be applauding. And we saw that here with discipline and with a methodical game plan, with flawless execution. You know, I think she learned from her mistakes, and I didn't see any major like, oh, she looked better. She just looked like she was out there to have a mistake-free execution of a game plan. And that's exactly what she did. And in that process, never allowed Grasso in this fight at all. We'll talk about Grasso later, but absolutely spot on. I thought Shevchenko was extremely impressive last night. Maybe not her most exciting performance, but she did exactly what she needed to do to have a win where she took little to no damage.
Yeah, great grappling defense. I'm not sure she was ever in any great danger, even if I felt as though Grasso should have been credited with more submission attempts. But Kenny, a lot of people just were not expecting that Valentina Shevchenko could return to this type of form. And I'm excited to see her against Manon Fiorot. That is absolutely going to be the fight. But as far as Alexa Grasso is concerned, I'm just going to go here now. So Anthony Lionheart-Smith on the post-fight show intimated that he doesn't love when all these teammates fight on the same card. And certainly there's an emotional attachment between Alexa Grasso and Irene Aldana, and emotional attachment between Alexa Grasso and Diego Lopez. Now, they all came up together. Irene Aldana is in that fight. Presumably, Alexa Grasso is watching that featured prelim in the back. I think there's some rumblings that maybe Alexa Grasso and Diego Lopez are dating. You know, he is one of her corner men. I guess that's maybe neither here nor there. But just think about this for a second. Alexa Grasso in the back, right? Getting ready to defend her title, watching Diego Lopez win his fight. He comes back, maybe gives her a hug, and maybe there's an exhale there, and then he's in her corner. I'm not saying that this was some major factor in the fight, but Alexa Grasso was in the shape of her life, not breathing heavy at all, and yet just completely frustrated all night and wasn't able to get anything going. So I don't know if there's criticism to be levied at Francisco Grasso. I don't know if there is emotion here at play, but not at all the effort that a lot of us expected to get out of Alexa Grasso, despite Shevchenko's greatness.
Well, I think it's an interesting point. You know, when I was fighting, we were talking about the BJ Penn fight earlier. When I had the BJ Penn fight, I had more people come out for that fight than any other thing. And I think there's always this like emotional thing that goes on with so many people are there. It's distracting. It can take away your focus. And the same goes for fight night. If you have a bunch of team members, in some ways it can buoy you. It can motivate you, inspire you, all that stuff. But a lot of that stuff can be emotionally draining as well. I'm not saying that's the case or anything like that, but it could be a factor, and it's something to consider. I didn't really think about that. So props to Anthony Smith for bringing up that point. Yeah, it's tough, man. At one point after round 3, Cody and I were just talking about that. It looked like she was about to cry. Like she seemed so frustrated. Even her little camera single when she was shadow boxing before her fight, she looked fast, but she looked very tense. She looked really, really tense. And to me, that wasn't the greatest sign. Sometimes that can work for you, but yeah, it just seemed like nothing was really going her way. But more than anything else, if you're looking at your last fight and you're saying, yes, it was a draw, but Shevchenko was taking me down. She was controlling me, and she was this close to beating me. She almost lost her belt that night. Then you better believe if you have 12 months or a little less or a little more to prepare, then you're going to shore up that weakness. And that was just not the case. I did not see a better grappler in Grasso. In some cases, I saw a worse grappler, whether that was her fault, your coach's fault, the camp's fault, injuries, whatever it was. I just did not see that. And because of that, we talked about that. While I did pick Grasso, I said if she did not make those changes with her grappling, she was going to lose that fight. And that's exactly what happened.
And I do think largely my thesis statement is that Valentina Shevchenko is the better fighter in this particular matchup and in this division. She won most of the rounds in this 3-fight series. Yes. She did make a couple of mistakes that Grasso capitalized upon, the face crank and, of course, round 5 of the second meeting. But we congratulate Valentina Shevchenko. And it really was cool to sort of see her exhale, Kenny. You know how much went into this as she tried to get her title back. And we always say one of the hardest things to do in this sport is to lose your championship and regain it. So congratulations to Valentina Shevchenko. I would like to transition to the featherweights if I could, Diego Lopez and Brian Ortega. And quickly, I do want to read a text from Diego Lopez's manager, Jason House, because I kept referring to Diego Lopez like touching his neck in the fight. Did you hear me say that? So I got a text from Jason House this morning. Hey, brother, Diego has a scar in his neck that itches when he sweats. That's why he always rubs his neck. You know those steel rods they use to build houses? When he was a kid, he got into an accident and one of them sliced his neck and left a bad scar. So my friend Ryan Rosillo was texting me. I think he thinks he has a necklace on because he always wears necklaces. But no, he had an accident and that itches him. So I did think it was interesting because I had noticed in the past, but he seemed to be doing it a lot. I wanted to make sure there wasn't an injury there. But, of course, it's neither here nor there. And Diego Lopez, Kenny, big win over Brian Ortega, moves into the top 3 at 145 pounds.
Diego Lopez, his hair is clean. His technique is clean. His execution is clean. Man, that dude's a problem. He really is. His ability to slip punches, get on the inside in the pocket, and throw back with speed and ferocity and accuracy is a thing of beauty. And really, he was piecing up Brian Ortega on the feet extremely well. He never allowed Ortega, even when they did have exchanges on the ground, to get the upper hand, really. He's on point. And I think that we talk about this all the time. We talked about this with O'Malley when he was coming up, but getting the right fights at the right time, getting the right amount of experience so that when you do get into these big spots, you can execute when you need to. You have to credit his management. You have to credit his coaching for him being put in this position and acting like he's been here before, man. And we talked about this with the Ige fight. Like, how many fights of experience did he take in with that last fight against Ige? He came in and was just dominant against one of the most durable and tough dudes that I've seen compete in the octagon, and that man is Brian Ortega. Not to mention, Ortega is very dangerous with his submission game, and he's been working really hard on his striking. He was trying to get things done. It's not like he checked out at any point during this fight. He continued to move forward. He was trying to look for the knockout. He just wasn't technically good enough to beat someone on the level of Diego Lopez. So Diego is well on his way for challenging for that belt. I think there's a lot of interesting challenges for him in the future, perhaps even a championship fight for his next one.
Yeah, no, it very well could be a championship fight next. The two names above him in the rankings are Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. Holloway is going to fight Ilia Topuria at UFC 308. But you got to think it's one of those big names or a title fight for Diego Lopez. And Kenny, how remarkable, right? Fights Movsar Evloev, May 2023 at UFC 288 on 5 days' notice. And look at him now, about 16 months later, one of the best featherweights in the world. And I said this on the broadcast, but the dude loses to Joe Anderson Brito on the Contender Series, then loses his next fight. And he's been on the precipice of a UFC contract for so long. And now to see this, he's a better human being than he is as a fighter. Couldn't be happier for Diego Lopez and Jason House, his manager, and everybody else. One thing Dominic Cruz said on the post show, Kenny, was that he felt like Ortega looked like a fighter who had trained hard, but trained martial arts. And Diego Lopez looked like a fighter who had trained martial arts, but also cardio and strength and conditioning. He felt like maybe that was the difference in the fight, that the martial arts were fairly even, but that the cardio was maybe what got it done for Diego Lopez. Anything there?
Yeah, it's possible. It's certainly possible. I don't know enough about their training camps, but I just saw a guy that was way better prepared, just a technically better boxer. And Lopez is going to be a problem for a lot of guys in that division. And the only two guys, actually those three guys that I see as a big challenge for him is Volkanovski, Holloway, and Topuria at the top. Like, those are the guys. And I'm really curious to see how his striking matches up against someone like that. But yeah, I mean, for sure, Lopez was prepared on a conditioning level and kind of really, I don't know, it just seemed like he was just there to fight a little more. But, you can't take that away from Ortega. Ortega definitely was still trying to win. But Lopez, to me, just seemed better prepared. Yeah.
And given everything that Diego Lopez had to deal with in advance of that Dan Ige fight at UFC 303, you have to believe that this was just a much different exercise and much easier to deal with. And, Brian Ortega was so great in our fighter meeting, but he gave Diego Lopez so much credit for fighting Dan Ige, right? Because Ortega went from 178 to 153 pounds. He felt bad about not being able to fight, but all he wanted to do was credit Lopez and just sort of wrapping his head, Ortega was, around everything Lopez had to deal with to then weigh in again at 65 and fight Ige. So props to T-City Brian Ortega. And his next fight is probably going to be at lightweight. There were some rumblings that Ortega was offered Charles Oliveira at Sphere at 155 pounds. So Brian Ortega is going to move up to lightweight, and there are a lot of big fights for him up there. Daniel Zellhuber and Esteban Ribovics in maybe the fight of the year, certainly the fight of the night, KenFlo. Nice to see the lightweight steal the show. What'd you think of that?
It was insane. It was absolutely insane. Now, I thought Zellhuber won the fight. We could talk about that later. It was really close. But man, props to both of those absolute savages for going out there and performing like they did. It was back and forth the whole fight. There was some tremendous striking exchanges pretty much throughout. There wasn't a whole lot of lag time during those exchanges. So these men came to fight, and I think in some cases it got the better of Zellhuber because of it, whether it was the crowd or the energy. He's a young man. I mean, he's still pretty new with his experience in the UFC, and I think that may have got the better of him. Sometimes you don't have to engage. Sometimes it makes more sense to do nothing than to do something. And I think something inside of Zellhuber kept pushing him to want the exchange. Now, we had an amazing fight because of it, but he unnecessarily engaged with Ribovics when sometimes it just made more sense for him to create space and reset. And it allowed Ribovics, who was the smaller, shorter guy, to get on the inside and land some tremendous combinations of his own, from the leg kicks to the body shots to those nasty, nasty hooks upstairs. I mean, Ribovics is an absolute warrior, but so is Zellhuber. It looked like he was out of it, right? It looked like they were going to stop the fight, and I think a lot of people probably wouldn't have had a problem with that, but his ability to stay in the game, keep his head and body moving to avoid some of those critical combinations that Ribovics was throwing to knock him out was just amazing. And what's crazy, in round 3, Zellhuber had dropped Ribovics, and it looked like he was well on his way to win that fight. But either way, I'd love to talk about the decision at some point, John, but man, that was an insane fight. Certainly, if it's not fight of the year, round 3 is definitely round of the year.
Yeah, it's interesting. Zellhuber's 25, and there is some sort of a career price to pay potentially if you have too many fights like this. But yeah, I definitely thought there was an argument to be made that Zellhuber won the fight. I just can't get past this lightweight division. And these 4 lightweights who competed on this night, Manuel Torres, Ignacio Bahamondes, Esteban Ribovics, and Daniel Zellhuber. Ribovics and Zellhuber, KenFlo, combined 28-2 coming in. Like, these guys are like in the top 30. Like, it's so hard, right? Like, it was so hard for our friend Matt the Steamroller Frivola to get a number next to his name at 55. And, call me when Zellhuber's actually ranked, because I believe that he's a top 18 lightweight in the world or so. It's just so hard at 55, bro.
Dude, I've been saying this, of course, maybe with a little bit of bias when I was fighting, but to this day, it's the toughest division in the world. These are the most skilled guys. There's no division that runs as deep as 155. 145 is badass. 135 is badass. 170 is badass. All these divisions, you got to be an absolute savage. But when it comes to depth and level of technique and toughness, I don't think there's any division that comes close. I don't think there's anything that comes close. 155 has been the division since I could remember. I mean, it's insane. Even when you go back to like the BJ Penn, Qual Ono, Jens Pulver days with all those set studs. So yeah, man, that division is crazy. Just to make it into the top 10, you're a savage.
KenFlo, Alex Davis is having a hard time technically. Cody, I just sent you his contact information. Perhaps you can see if there's a way to get Alex Davis on with us. But I really find it interesting, the rebuild for Zellhuber, to see where Ribovics goes from here. Fascinating fight there at 155 pounds. And Joe Rogan said maybe the best fight that he's ever called. Hey, real quick, I just had in my notes, I don't think the UFC would give Diego Lopez Arnold Allen, but I do think that that's an interesting fight at featherweight. But I think if you're the UFC and you're a promoter, these are things that you have to weigh. I don't know what the internal metrics say about Diego Lopez and his relative star power and how much he would make the UFC if he were the champion versus someone like Arnold Allen, who would have the entire United Kingdom behind him. But a lot of those things go into it. And you can be sure that if Jack Della Maddalena is the undisputed UFC welterweight champion with an entire continent behind him, that would be a moneymaker for the UFC. So do you think Diego Lopez's star power is such that he's moved himself past that Arnold Allen fight and it is only going to be one of those big three?
It's possible. I think, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that. But I do think that you have a guy in Lopez who's now represents Brazil and Mexico really, really well. And
you're right. Two nations.
Yeah. And I think that the way that he fights is what makes him so interesting as well. I mean, he always goes out to perform. He's always exciting and always is ready to fight at any time. And I think that's what makes him so beloved. And you have this huge show, being on the main card of O'Malley and Merab, and you're going to get a bigger fan base. So I'm excited to see what's in store for him as well. And definitely one of the stars at 145 pounds. There's no question about it. But more than anything else, I think it's the way that he fights that makes him a star and that makes him one of those go-to guys that the UFC has on its roster.
All right, we also congratulate Ronaldo Rodriguez getting it done in the main card opener at flyweight against Ode Osborne. He had to dig deep, and that came at a point in time where the Mexicans, I think, had dropped 4 successive fights, so that was a big win for him in that moment. He's now won 7 fights in a row. We will touch on the featured prelim, of course. We'll touch on some of these other performances. What about Nacho, though, KenFlo? Did you see the Chilean Ignacio Bahamondes knockout Manuel Torres on the prelim portion?
I did.
Dude.
That was nasty, dude. That kid's good, man. He's really, really good. And Torres is a problem.
You talk about Ludovic Klein, who has a win over Ignacio Bahamondes and how good he is.
Yeah.
I really do believe that this Chilean kid who was a national Chilean kickboxing champion at 14, I think he's now 27, has so many tremendous male influences in his life now in Chicago. Mike Valley is just such a good coach and a centering individual. And then, of course, Bilal Muhammad. When you look at Nacho, is it a fair question for me to ask you how high the ceiling is? Certainly, he's a willing grappler, but we haven't necessarily seen him tested in those realms. But he does have a submission game. He's got offensive submissions more than some of these other guys. How high is the ceiling for the 6'3" lightweight Ignacio Bahamondes?
Yeah, 6'3". Gosh, it's insane. I think he has a very high ceiling. He's clearly committed to the game, and is so confident in his skills now that he expects to go out there and knock out every guy he faces. And, and again, to kind of get back to Bilal, anytime you have a champion or a high-level fighter, just a high-level fighter in your camp and in your surroundings alone makes you better and adds a certain level of confidence. You add that now to the fact that you have this homegrown world champion in Bilal Muhammad. That is going to help you. You're going to believe in that system that much more. You're going to gain that much more from your training sessions as well. So I think he's certainly a guy that can be elite at 155 pounds, but you mentioned the grappling. I think that's where he needs to make his greatest gains. And not only will it make him just a better fighter overall, it's going to give him that much more confidence as a striker, knowing that if they do go to the ground or if they do try to take him down, he'll be ready for it.
All right, we are going to reschedule with Alex Davis having a hard time connecting, so I apologize to him. He did corner both Ketlin Souza and Big Norman Dumont to victories last night, so we were really hoping to connect with him today. He also just has some tremendous thoughts about improving this sport that we all love so dearly. If somebody asked you, KenFlo, before we get to Big Norm, if you could do one thing to change mixed martial arts today. So oftentimes the first thing I say is I would give judges the resource that is half points. But then somebody said to me this weekend, how do you not focus on weight cutting? And so I do think that forced to re-answer for me, if I could change anything in MMA, it would be having fighters compete more closer to their natural weight and not stare death in the face and cut all of this weight. Then second for me would be giving judges half points. But, when you look at modern day mixed martial arts and all the progress that we have made, like what for you would be the one thing you would change to try to make the sport better?
Oh, gosh, it's difficult because I like things nice and simple. And in my opinion, I think sometimes when you add complexity into a system, you offer up vulnerabilities. There are other things that can go wrong. But I do think that if we can have some kind of measurement or have some kind of accountability for the judges in this sport, I think we'd be better off in the future. What do I mean by that? And we've talked about this. Have some kind of criteria that if a judge maybe has a bad call, right? Like we've had the UFC literally take them out of the arena, like you're done for the night. Well,
right.
What do we do for them like in the future? Like there should be some kind of system where we're able to grade them, and just like kind of they can move up from the local to the regional to the highest levels of the sport, where they can almost be downgraded based on how they're judging fights. I think that would give them the incentive to make sure that they're doing the best job possible. I'm sure many are, no question. And there's only a couple of judges out there, but I think that would help the sport. That's something I'd like to see, is have some kind of, because the fighters, if they don't win, they're held accountable, right? They move down the rankings. They don't get the fight they want, whatever it is. They lose sponsorship. There should be something like that, I think, for the judges.
I think so too. I think that is the biggest issue when it comes to all of the different segments of our MMA population. There just aren't enough elite judges, and we need to sort of build out that base and hold those guys accountable even at the highest levels.
Yeah.
All right, real quickly, want to touch on the featured prelim if I could. What a productive week it was for the 9th-ranked bantamweight contender, Norma Dumont. She'll be in the top 5 now after getting past Irene Aldana. We'll talk about the cut and everything else as well. But, Dumont just had such a productive week, right? From talking shit about Juliana Pena and Raquel Pennington. I just feel like she now is all of a sudden in this mix at 135 pounds. And I did drop a big Norm on the air. I couldn't resist.
So good, dude. Listen, mind your P's and Q's if you're going to be around Big Norm, because she is a problem.
Dude. Yeah.
She fought so damn well. Listen, there's not a whole lot of people in the sport that are good at fighting going backwards and being able to counter. And when you see Big Norm do her thing in that weight class, man, against an aggressive Aldana, like, I think that, and DC was kind of saying something to the effect of that, like, Dumont didn't like when Aldana was being aggressive. In my opinion, I think it helped her. Like, I think she was so good at being able to find ways to counter her, and she was comfortable everywhere. She was so versatile with her striking, and I think that also was the difference. Like, I think Aldana is excellent with her hands, but Dumont is much, much more than that. Not only was she awesome with her jab and her boxing, but her kicking, her movement, her elbows. Dude, she is nasty. Wasn't so successful with her takedowns. I would have liked to see maybe more of that, but she didn't need to. She was so clean with her movement and footwork, man. I was blown away, and I truly believe another fight or two, she could be fighting for that belt.
Yeah.
She's that good, John.
So Irene Aldana's cut was one of the worst cuts that I have ever seen. And I can't even imagine some of the visuals that we're going to see on her social media as she gets all stapled up. But when we showed the worst shot of the cut, Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier were nowhere to be found. Rogan's in the octagon, and DC, I think, was making his way up to our pay-per-view stand-up position or whatever it was. So I am the only one there having to react to the cut. And Rogan suggested it was one of the worst cuts that he had ever seen. And at no point did the referee call in the ringside position to take a look. And I know that Dominic Cruz was very happy with the way the commission handled this night and referees and doctors allowing these fights to continue. But for me, Kenny, it's borderline criminal when you have that much blood and grossly inconsistent that the referee here doesn't call for the doctor to at least come in and take a look. Like, what are we doing?
All right, so John, I don't really like shaking hands, right? Why? It's like we get germs all over our hands, right? And I've gotten sick from actual autograph signings and stuff, so I'm like a little neurotic about this stuff. But anyways, right? So our hands are dirty. Everything, we're dirty all the time. Our gloves, you think about the gloves, all that stuff. So when you have a cut that is that big, it's like a hotel for bacteria and stuff. So I keep thinking about that, right? So that happens with little cuts. You don't even need a cut that's visible to get some kind of infection, okay? I've had a lot of different staph infections, elbows, knees. It sucked. It's horrible. When you see a cut that big, and that wasn't the only one. She had a huge one on her forehead, right? Probably the worst I've ever seen. And it wasn't like just one little slit. It looked like she got hacked away by an axe. Like a couple times. That freaking bad.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And then she's got a huge cut on her nose. Her nose is certainly broken. Maybe some kind of other thing going on with her face. I mean, first of all, Adana is insanely tough to get through that. But as far as worst cuts, that might be the worst cut I've ever seen in mixed martial arts, in combat sports, period. It was absolutely nasty. And certainly an argument for that fight to have been stopped a lot earlier. But man, that was crazy. And it was the forehead one that was from the headbutt. And then I think maybe there's another one with the elbow that maybe compounded that.
Yes.
Okay.
And it matters not what caused the cut in terms of referee or doctor involvement, right?
Sure.
It was an inadvertent clash of heads. Herb Dean was the referee here, and I'm sure most of the fan base is going to laud him for allowing this fight to continue. But if any of my referee contemporaries want to text me, feel free. I know these guys are very close-knit, and they don't want to sort of take issue with something somebody else does. But I find it hard to believe that Mark Goddard or Jason Herzog in there would not have called in the doctor. Like, what do we just want? Like, I don't know. I just feel like we're getting away from ourselves a little bit here in terms of, like, fighter safety.
Yeah, that was one of those where, like, I wasn't even sure, like, stitches were going to do the job. Like, I'm not even joking. Maybe staples for that one. That one is
100%.
extremely bad. They're going to need a plastic surgeon to really seal that up. I don't know how that's going to look from a scar perspective. I don't know how that's going to hold up for her in the future when it comes to other fights. She's going to need a whole lot of time off. It was a really, really bad one, man. And hopefully there's no complications when it comes to whatever infections she may face in the future too. So, crazy.
And it's tough. And I know these guys have a really difficult job. I felt like some of Daniel Zellhuber's body language was such that I think Jason Herzog could have stopped that fight. And, he had a fight, I think maybe it was Nassourdini Mavov and Jared Cannonier earlier this year, where maybe he was criticized for stopping the fight too early. It's a very difficult job for these referees, but you have to be convicted and you have to not worry about promotional pressure or fan appeal, right? You need to stop fights when you're instinctively thinking they should be stopped. So,
100%.
I mean, I thought that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please, all you.
Sorry, John. We're off our method there. So I was going to say that, for me, just like a fighter can get emotional during a fight, it's really easy for a referee to get emotional or to not have his head in the game during these crazy exchanges that are happening inside an octagon. They have a crazy difficult job and are under enormous pressure themselves. And I think looking back on that fight in particular, I would say Jason Herzog made the right call in that Zellhuber-Ribovics fight. Like, and you know what I mean? Like, if it was stopped, I don't think anybody would have had a problem. But based on how he was seeing Zellhuber defend himself and move his head, he absolutely made the right call. And huge props to Herzog. Sometimes we get caught up criticizing referees. I think we have to say, awesome job by Herzog.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair, right? And certainly the result speaks to him making the right decision. But you can certainly argue that he would have been criticized by some for stopping that fight and preventing the rest of the war that ensued. It just comes back to this statement that referees are praised when they let fights go long and good things happen, and it seems like they're criticized when they stop fights even a scotch prematurely. All right, we got to get on out of here. Thanks to everybody for indulging us live here today for this Riyadh season Noche UFC recap, and just an incredible week. Thanks to everybody for all the support, our incredible UFC Live production team. That Sphere event was like nothing I've done before, and hopefully it isn't the last of those special type shows. We might be back later in the week with an interview with Merab Dvalishvili. We wanted to at least give him this Sunday to sort of marinate in his win. But short of that, we will be back next Monday to get you ready for Benoit Saint-Denis and Renato Moicano. With that, don't forget to go to KenFlorian.com, JonAnik.com, Noche UFC. Actually, the promo code's Noche if you want 15% off all Anik and Florian podcast merchandise, One More Sleep merchandise, and all of those good things. Our producer is Cody Merrow. With that, for KenFlo, I'm Jon Anik. Thank you all for watching this live edition of the Anik and Florian podcast. We will talk to you potentially in a few days with Merab, otherwise next Monday. Until then, enjoy your football Sunday, if that applies. See you later.